Hello, I'm Nana Last, and I'm going to tell you about my course Architecture 5500, Typology, Autonomy, and Morphogenesis. The course is open to all levels of students, undergrads, grads, and PhD students. And it's a history theory seminar that examines these three interrelated approaches to the understanding and production of architecture in the later 20th and early 21st centuries. The course will examine the history of each line of thinking, including their relations to science, critical theory, diagramming, digital and post-digital forms of production. The course will begin by looking at the 18th and 19th century introduction of typology as really a systemized form of architectural knowledge. The course begins by studying the disciplinary knowledge of architecture organized around the idea of type. And it will investigate type both as the construction of a set of abstracted principles and as a generative method. The course will study typology through four questions. The first of these is the question of typology and science and classification. Typology is a form of classification and has a basis in the sciences. So we will look at both the scientific basis, as here with Humboldt, and the disciplinary one in architecture with Durand. Von Humboldt was a 18th and 19th century Prussian scientist and geographer who visited the Americas and really did work that lays the foundation for the field of biogeography. This very famous image, known as the Chimborazo map from 1807, shows a range in the Andes as a cross-section. And what's really most important for us is that the map displays complex information together, including such things as the animals and plants found at each elevation. We're going to then look at the work of Jean-Nicolas Louis Durand and the systemization of architectural knowledge and procedural differentiation, which is again going to be this idea of setting up type as a way to create a very systematic form of architectural knowledge. We will later in the semester consider other models from the sciences that are taken into architecture, as with the work of Darcy Thompson. The second question that we will look at typology through is the question of autonomy. As a disciplinary system, typology raises the question of autonomy and the extent to which it is a system that defines itself. This questioning that we will do will take several forms, including that of how we understand building types in relation to the larger system of the city. Here, the work of Rossi is one of the examples that we will look at, both in his work and his writings. And we are going to look at the larger question of the relationship of autonomy and disciplinarity in architecture. That was a large issue really in the 1980s. Here's more work by Rossi and Imanino. So we're going to then move on to the question of typology and history. The question of history emerges in a number of ways. The idea of the larger system of the city and memory, again, as with Rossi, as well as the development of different understandings of typology and practices and debates that develop at that time. There's not one idea of what typology is, so we will look at multiple ones. Here we will also consider other forms of typologies in practice, such as the work of metabolists that you see here. And we will read Mackey's investigations in collective form. You see some diagrams from the kind of thinking that he was doing on this image. In another way, the idea of history itself is being rethought through models of science and classification, and we will look at the work of Manuel de Landa in this. And finally, in a different way, the idea of history emerges in relations to various architectural practices. Here's a different typology one, but particularly looking at the work of Herzog and Demeron, whose work brings together ideas from the sciences and really with other kinds of logics from the visual realm. So it's bringing together multiple logics together. We're going to look both at this exhibition that from 2002, Archaeology of the Mind, that they're involved in, as well as some of their own practices and works that we will consider around these questions. Finally, in the last section, we will look at typology and the question of the new and morphogenesis. And in here, we will look at how typology is a form of generative practice, but also that there are other recent systematic models of morphogenesis, including those that develop from architecture's turn to computation, and those developed from other models like the sciences and thermodynamics. So we have a range of things that fall into this category, including Greg Lynn's embryological house, the work of FOA and phylogenesis, And then there's a sort of later stage that isn't other models, but is directly built on current issues of typology and some current practices. And in addition, we will discuss the question of the new, and somebody like Stanford Quinter raises that, as well as does the work of Risen and Umamoto in their Atlas of Novel Tectonics.